extra seats on the front row still, and some seats to my left, your right. So still some seats left in the house. My name is Brian Price. I'm a board member with the Dallas Way. Welcome to our third and final roundtable discussion for 2018, focusing on the diverse stories and histories of the LGBTQ history in Dallas. Let me start with a couple thank yous and round of applauses for our supporters for this event. First, we have a big debt of thanks to Finnegan Jones and our partners with Trans-Cendence for working with us for this event. I'd also really like to thank the Resource Center for providing the space as well. Thirdly, I'd also like to ask my fellow board members with the Dallas Way to stand. I'm going to make one quick statement. We have a few of our founding board members rolling off the board this year, and I just want to recognize them briefly. We have Buddy Molyneux and Robert Emery and Mike Anglin are rolling off the board this year. Evelyn Pridgeon, our current president, is also rolling off. She's not a founding board member, but she sort of basically is. She's leaving very soon after. So I wanted to give a quick round of applause for them for the work they've done in creating a foundation for telling stories like this and creating a space where we can discuss the history of our community. So big round of applause for these guys. The mission of the Dallas Way is to gather, organize, store, and present the complete LGBTQ history of Dallas, Texas. Founded in 2017, the Dallas Way has led the effort to gather and preserve the untold stories of the LGBTQ community of Dallas through the collection and preservation of historical archives, the capturing of video and audio recordings of personal oral histories of individuals, the collecting and publishing of the written stories of Dallas area LGBTQ organizations, members of the LGBTQ community, and the public speaking presentations of personal stories as told by individuals from within the LGBTQ community and by the many dedicated allies of our community. A little bit about our roundtable series that we put on this year. Our Stories, Our History is a new roundtable series of the Dallas Way focusing on sharing traditionally underrepresented stories and history within the Dallas LGBTQ community. Through discussion and organizational partnerships, we hope to expand the collection efforts of Dallas's LGBTQ history to be inclusive of all voices and stories within the community. And a quick note about our work this year. In addition to these roundtable discussions, we're using them as opportunities to expand the LGBTQ collection that we're partnering with UNT Special Collections on that's been building for several years now. So we're using, in March we had a roundtable discussion on the Latinx, Latino LGBTQ community of Dallas. In June we had a roundtable discussion on the Black LGBTQ history of Dallas. Today is our Transgender History roundtable discussion. And from these events we're hoping to build new partnerships and identify new collections and diversify the collection and engage new communities. So if anyone here has an interest in volunteering or supporting this cause, please find a board member after the meeting, after the discussion. So real quick before we start, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments about sort of the significance of what we're doing. Collecting and sharing stories and histories of LGBTQ+ lives is one of the most powerful and radical acts we can do as volunteers and leaders in this community. So today we listen to stories of transgender lives within our community. By highlighting these stories that have perhaps been some of the least visible and most silenced within our community, we can create new opportunities for reflection, for relationship, and for change. One second. So we're very lucky to have Finnegan Jones here with multiple hats, but with Trans-Cendence, the organization. He's going to be moderating our discussion tonight. Finnegan is the executive director and co-founder of Trans-Cendence International. He serves as a leader in the transgender community of DFW and as a consultant to other LGBTQ communities outside of Dallas. He sits on the advisory boards for the Diversity Center of Oklahoma and LGBTQ Saves, and works as a consultant for several organizations. Finnegan participates in social education, civil and human rights advocacy, and works closely with many leaders and organizations in the community to help further education on transgender and gender diversity issues and policies, and to bring much needed health care to the transgender community. Finnegan is a disabled veteran of the United States Coast Guard, transgender gender identity consultant, allied training consultant. He is the first transgender man to win primary election in the state of Texas for the Texas House of Representatives for the 2018 election. He lives in Arlington with his wife Susan and their wonderful four-legged critters. So let's give a big round of applause for Finnegan and we'll introduce our panelists and get our discussion started.
Hi everybody, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for those applause. Brian asked me real quick before we... Is this a little bit like this? Is it on? Are we on? You're on. Okay. Brian asked me to tell you just a little bit about Trans-Cendence, a little history. So Trans-Cendence was started by my wife and I, Susan, who couldn't be here tonight. She's taking care of our brand new little puppy we just got. And yes, we added another four-legged. So we started Trans-Cendence International in February of 2012, pretty soon after I started my transition from female to male, because really it wasn't because of the support for the trans community, it was the support for their significant others, their spouses, their family members, their allies, and their friends. There was really not a lot of support in this community for the other members of the family. And what we realized real quickly was that how is Susan going to know how to support me if she isn't supported herself and taught how to support me as a trans person? So that's how we started. We started with one tiny little support group in Fort Worth, Texas, and there are a couple of people here tonight who were at that first meeting. And I think we had 10 people at that first meeting. And now, 6 years later, we have chapters in Dallas, Denton, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Eden, Oklahoma, and we are just about to launch, I think maybe next week, Mid-Cities, our Mid-Cities chapter. And what we do is offer support. We facilitate and gain leaders within the community to support each other. So at our meetings, everyone is included at our meetings. One of the things that we noticed was that a lot of the transgender support organizations out there in the entire United States are very exclusive. Like, you can only go if you're a trans individual, or their spouse can only go if the trans individual is with them. That makes no sense to us. We were just like, that's ridiculous. So, sorry, but that's just crazy. So anyway, so our meetings, everyone in this room is invited to come to our meetings. And the reason we do that is because intersectionality and things like this is how we learn about each other and how we build community with each other. So Susan and I, and many people that have helped us, have built a community in the DFW area that we can support each other now. So that's a little bit about Trans-Cendence. And if you want to learn more, you can go to our website, transcendint.org. And one thing I want to say real fast is that I'm so happy to have my friend Mel Leroy in the house from AIDS Outreach in Fort Worth, because Trans-Cendence, I worked with Mel, and we were able to get the first free HRT clinic started in Fort Worth, Texas. So if you're a transgender individual in this room and you are looking to try and start hormones or mental health, you can go to that clinic, and your appointment, your blood work, and your mental health care are all free. The only thing you'll have to pay for are your hormones, and it's not dependent upon county. So that's one of the main reasons that it was started. Thank you, Mel. I appreciate that. So here we go. So I'm going to introduce my friends and panelists for tonight, who I am so excited to have I've had so much fun talking with especially Lori and Lauren about their stories. So first we have Mason Tripp. I do not have a bio for Mason, but he'll tell you his story. He's an amazing trans man here in this community, and he's been a member of this community for quite a long time. He also plays in the Oklahoma band, so he plays trombone, I think, right? Or euphonium. I play euphonium too. I want to play so bad, and I don't have time. But I will sing. Anyway, so he's my good friend, Mason Tripp. And then we have Renee Baker, Dr. Renee Baker. Renee holds a doctorate in engineering and spent over 20 years in industry and academy. Renee previously owned her own massage practice providing mind, body, spirit therapy. She currently is a private practice counselor. Renee is a past board member of Youth First Texas, a nonprofit organization supporting LGBT youth. She holds over 50 publications. Renee has a son, Alex, and currently lives in the Colony, Texas. So that's Renee. And then we have Miss Lauren Davis, right here to Renee's left. Lauren Davis is a native of New Orleans with long-standing family ties to Dallas. She was born in 1954 and was intensely transsexual prior to age 5. She began her transition after high school graduation and completed her final surgery in the late 1970s. Along the way, Lauren experienced violence in her life, discrimination in education, and exploitation in her workplace. Lauren preserved and became a hairstylist working at the Hotel Le Meridien, the J.W. Marriott, and the Chateau Sonesta. Today, Lauren is pursuing the higher education that she was denied in the 1970s. She's a teaching assistant and funded PhD candidate at UTD, where she researches the intersections of race, sexuality, gender, and class on marginalized communities. And then we have Lori Jackson. Lori received her final SRS surgery at age 16 after completing the required 5-year observation at the University of Arkansas Medical Center at Little Rock under the supervision of then pediatrician Dr. Jocelyn Elders. She chose her doctor from a list provided by the Erickson Educational Foundation. She moved to Dallas at age 20 to start a new life, believing that after what she had already done, anything would be possible. Never really thinking it would turn out as well as it has, there were low points at age 14 and age 30 with suicide attempts. But with hard work and some great therapists, she survived to be here today. After finding employment difficult, she did some modeling and then created her own successful beauty business in the early 80s, lasting over 2 decades. Learning that if you can't seem to find one way to survive and be happy, having determination will help you find a way, and that is the truth. Her favorite motto is, where there's a will, there's a way, and that is true. All right, thank you. So we're going to jump into our questions real quick, and we'll just kind of go down the line, and if y'all will just speak a little bit to the questions and your stories. So Mason, when and at what age did you begin your transition? And just tell us a little bit about your story and how you got here.
Hi, my name is Mason. I was born in Houston, and back in 1957. I grew up, came up like all the other good lesbians, went to Texas Women's University. I found out there's quite a few trans men that have gone there too. I lived in the lesbian community from 1980 to 2000. It wasn't quite right for me, but it was the only place that I could really feel like I fit in. So back in 1997, a friend of mine in the band, playing the Oklahoma band, a friend of mine was starting a transition. Now I didn't know it was possible to transition from female to male. I'd heard something about it back in the 80s. But I thought, I'm never going to be able to do that. I mean, it's just not possible. So when this person kind of came out to me and showed me that it was possible, it's like I started doing research on it. And thank God for the internet, because I tell you, that's just when the internet was starting to get started. And without that, I mean, I don't see how people existed really before. And I give a lot of credit to that for our community. So I did research on it, and it was kind of, the next 3 years, kind of like back and forth. And finally, in 2000, I decided what a great thing to do to start a new millennium. Start a new life. Because I decided, I was 42 then, and I decided I didn't want to go the rest of my life without knowing what it was like. So I've had a pretty positive experience, actually. I found a therapist. There was a trans men group that had started, and it was like one of the first groups in Dallas. So there was older people here and there that had transitioned on their own, but this was, I think, the first time that an actual group had gotten together. We were kind of all going through it together. So we had a doctor, we had a doctor to do hormones, a surgeon, everything. So we went through all that, and it seemed pretty easy. I didn't really have any hard problems with work because I worked for a gay man, and it was fine. It's a small business, so and all our clients are primarily in the community. I feel like I'm pretty fortunate because I have been in this community for so long. A lot of my brothers have gone on, that, especially that transitioned when I did, to be still. And I thought about that, but it's like, it's not for me. I just, I want to be involved, I want to be out there. I just feel better in the LGBT community than trying to live still in a straight community. It just doesn't fit me. So that's, brings me, I've had my surgeries, been on hormones for 18 years now. Took me forever to grow a beard. This is one of the things I really wanted. It took me forever, and I still can't. So it's kind of one of the trophies, I don't know, better word for that. But so I had a lot of support. One thing I just have to say about my mother, when she came up the year I was to visit me, the year I was starting the transition. I felt like I really need to tell her. Sat her down and told her. I had all this stuff for her. I printed out for her to read. And she says, "Oh, I know all about that. I watch Oprah." So she was okay with it, but she kind of flipped back and forth because, like, after she thought about it, she said, "Well, can't you just be a strong woman? Just live like you're living, and why do you need to change?" But after time went on, and she never stopped. She never stopped loving me or said, any kind of bad words or anything for it. It took her a while to get. She lived in Corpus Christi, so I didn't see her all the time. So it took her a while for her to start calling me proper pronouns. But so that's pretty much where I am today.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I guess I have to hold it really close. I'm Renee Baker again, and I transitioned myself eventually in the years 2004 to 2007. I'm kissing this microphone. I was born in 1964, and kind of came to the realization when I was probably in junior high school that I was transgender. Of course, we didn't use that term transgender until, was it? Okay, maybe I was on flight back then, I don't know. But transgenderism was not really in the news back in those days. We just occasionally you'd have something on television, and it was actually on a 60 Minutes television show when I found out, oh, you can do that? That's awesome. And so, somebody has to plant a seed, and why not be 60 Minutes, right? So, or Oprah. Oprah wasn't on TV yet, I guess. Maybe Phil Donahue back in those days. So I guess I had been thinking about it, and I grew up in South Dakota, and the cows at the end of my street, and so you really didn't think that it was a reality of any possibility to do a transition. And the examples we really had were trans people back then were people that were really having difficulties with the prejudice in society. And trans people are, especially, I would say more so trans women, have had a lot of prejudice against us from the early days. And I'm not minimizing its prejudice against everyone, but it was very difficult in those days to even consider a transition. And so I just assumed I would live a normal life. And I got married when I was very young, at 19 years of age, and we had a son. And I had come out to my wife at the time when I was 19 or 20, and we talked about a transition, but it wasn't really right for either one of us at the time. And so, in cross-dressing, I really don't like that term that much because I feel like we should all wear what we want to wear. But that was really not even something you could do. You couldn't really expand your gender expression. Maybe the top on this side. Trying to express yourself is an important thing, but you're really got an internal sense of identity that's trying to get out more than anything else. And at that time, I tried to go through a gender transition pretty much without any kind of trans support. I didn't know another trans person. I didn't know anything about community. I didn't know about the neighborhood. I didn't know there was a neighborhood until like 2004. It's like, oh, there's a neighborhood. I guess I should have checked.
There's at least one of everything.
I guess there is, but I was very, very naive about those things. And I was married and then I had a son, and of course you want to keep your family intact. And it really becomes a struggle of, do I want to disappoint so many people in my life, or do I want to go ahead and become a more authentic person unto myself? So I felt like I can't win. I'm stuck, and I can't be authentic, and I can't have the relationships that I want. And so I decided not to transition in the early 90s. And then it was, a number of years goes by, and then you're just getting to a point where you just can't stand to live another day trying to put on someone else's uniform to go to work every day. And so it was about 14 years ago in 2004, I was working in the defense industry, in the don't ask, don't tell industry, and decided I had to do something. And I didn't know what it was going to be at that time. But what I decided to do was at least come out as trans, and I was going to be an openly trans person, whatever that meant. I didn't know if that meant I was going to transition or not, but I was tired of being in a closet. The closet is terrible. So it was April 1st, 2004, and I decided, that's it, I'm done. I'm done with being in the closet. It's a special day. It's a good day to come out, right? Good day to stay out and to declare that you're a proud person of being transgender. Well, that was the beginning of the end of my marriage as well, and that was the sad part. My son was, well, let's see, I think he was 18 when we finally got a divorce. So we worked together for a good long number of years, and it wasn't as if we hated each other. We had a very amicable divorce. Is that the right word? Amicable. And so as far as divorces go, it went okay. It's very hard to go through because you're leaving someone that you love very much, and you're having to dismantle a life. And I went through, I decided, well, the next few months went by, and I decided to go ahead and start my hormone therapy. And I transitioned living full-time in 2006, about a year after on hormones, and did all my surgeries and things like that. And I guess ever since then, You know, it's very fulfilling to be that authentic sense of self, but I still from time to time, feel a sense of loss of the relationship. So I mean, that part has always been hard. But at the same time, I felt like if I'm going to be the most loving person that I can be, loving towards myself and loving towards other people, I can't be spending a lot of mental energy wishing all the time. Wishing I could just be myself for a day. So you really have to go through some kind of a transition in order to be a fully loving person. And so that's what I did, and it's been rewarding in so many ways, but also many challenges along the way.
Okay, it's working. It's working. Working. Kind of, maybe, sort of. My name's Lauren Davis. As Tegan said, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I was kind of born and grew up in the neighborhood, at least. I went to elementary school in the French Quarter, so it was not unusual for me to see things that a lot of children probably never got to see. When I was in the 11th grade, I was expelled from high school. I ended up having to repeat half a year because I had been, according to the assistant principal, seen in drag at a notorious bar during Mardi Gras.
What year was that?
That was 1971. 71 or 71? Mardi Gras 71. Yeah, I used to sneak out the window. I was a terrible child. Once I found a copy of the Christine Jorgensen story when I was 14 in a used bookstore and read that, I thought, okay, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm supposed to be headed. So I would sneak out the window, have a cab waiting down the block, and off I'd go. But I decided I would try to turn that around a little bit and be a better student. And so the following year, I actually did win a scholarship when I finally graduated to any university in the state of Louisiana. So I decided I'd go to LSU Baton Rouge. And at LSU Baton Rouge, I had already begun to transition because I had resources in the French Quarter that I could find out where to obtain hormones and what was necessary. So I had begun to transition, but the problem was I was living in an all-boys dormitory. So my roommate, who was still a friend of mine to this day, would wait until the showers were completely empty, and he would come and get me and say, okay, you can come now. He would stand outside and guard the door for me. Well, that lasted a brief amount of time, but then trouble started and a little violence ensued, and I was cornered by some boys in the hallway, and I ended up in the Dean of Men's office, and he told me that he could not protect me and that he could not ensure my safety if I continued my behavior. And I told him, okay, see you later. And I was gone. So fortunately in New Orleans, fortunately and unfortunately in a way, there were, along with those resources came some exploitation, because it was very difficult to find employment in a job as a cis woman, even as a young person, because people just kind of knew who we were, and we were kind of like everywhere, concentrated in this area. So there were clubs, there were 3 of them, and so I went to the My Oh My Club, and Pat Waters said, can you sing? And I said, no. And he said, can you dance? And I said, yes, actually I can, because I had some training as a dancer. And So I went to work there, and so I worked there until shortly before that club closed. Then I went to work at the Powder Puff Review at the Government Inn, and the Silver Frolics, and that sort of put me in a holding pattern as far as my transition was concerned, because they paid us just enough to live. I mean, just enough to, and you prayed that you didn't break a heel in a shoe, because it would take most of your week's wages to replace that pair of shoes. So, I mean, it was a very precarious existence, even though you were not relegated necessarily to the actual streets. You were, they'd pull you out of the gutter and put you on a stage, in other words. So, once I reached 24, things got kind of mentally bad for me, and my father was determined that I was simply going through a phase, and this reminds me of your story a little bit, Mason. I knew there was hope, though, when he said, "Why can't you be a regular queer like the rest of your friends?" And I told him I just can't. So my mother called him, and they worked it out, and they ended up finally graciously and generously paying for my surgery. So that's how I got to that point. 1979. That's the end of 38 years.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lori Jackson, born in '56. I hail from the state of Arkansas. At the age of 10, it became very evident to my parents that, or my parent, I'm from a divorced family, so my single mother, at the age of 10, realized that something wasn't quite right with her kid. And so, not knowing what to do, this is 1966, took me to a doctor and pretty much was like, "Fix my kid, what's wrong with my kid?" So I fortunately, now that I look back at that, I got put with the Dr. Joycelyn Elders, who was with, if anybody remembers, Not Let Go for telling us we should all masturbate under Clinton. Thank goodness for her, and a wonderful social worker who kind of got behind my case and was really pushing to, as I will quote them, "Let this kid get on with its life." That, of course, interrupted schooling when I was allowed at the age of 10 to assume the role that I was going to become. There was a school for troubled children on board on the campus of the University of Arkansas Med Center. And so I went to school there, only after we had gone to school with my mother, and they had sort of told the principal what was going on, and they, of course, said, "Well, where is it going to go to the bathroom?" So, first term, if I was an it, but I was there. So, went to the school and got through it the best way we could, and of course, closer to the age of 18, I quit and took a GED, went to the University of Arkansas, and finished my education. But it was a difficult time at that, in the 60s, 70s, definitely no internet, no resources to my mother. I have to give credit to her, who was a very forward-thinking woman and just wanted to get her kid fixed. So with the help of those people behind me medically, I was allowed to search for a doctor. At that point, there was, you could write to somebody in the mail with a stamp to send you a list of people that might be able to fix the, at the time we called it a birth defect. And I got a list of doctors in an envelope. I still have a letter to this day telling us a list of doctors around the world that could fix the problem. And from that list, I chose one. I don't know how my mother and I came up with it, or why we picked the one that we picked, but thank God it was a good one. Came here in Dallas at the age of 20 to do a little modeling, so I helped. Tried to live with a secret stealth, and as a giraffe, I kind of stick out in the crowd. So I did a little modeling, but one of the first modeling jobs I had, it was for a car company. It made the Dallas Morning News newspaper on Sunday. I was in a bikini, and a phone call was made to the photographer who said, "I think that girl in that picture is really a boy." So I did not get paid for that job, and I made me aware that if I wanted to do this successfully and as less ripple in the water or any bumps in the road, I was going to have to kind of conform and kind of fit in the best way I could. So I sort of tried to go that route, realizing that, you know, coming out of the hills of Arkansas, I didn't know what I thought I was the only one on earth, and that I was the freak of all freaks, and that I was trying to hide this secret as best I could. But came here, and first time I knew really kind of what I was, or what they called people like me, was there was a bar on Harwood Street, downtown Dallas, called the Old Plantation. And funny story was told when we were leaving there one evening that the police will arrest you. So if you're in a dress, particularly if you're in a dress, but which I was. And we would run from our cars from the bar to the, you know, because they were stationed out there looking for us to catch us. So I got here out of the hills of Arkansas, stupid, dumb as a rock, but I got through it, and I've had a great time. There has been some low points, obviously. As Finnegan told in the bio, that at 13, I just didn't know how at 13 this was going to work out, or what surgery was going to be like. Didn't really matter, but I didn't think I could take it. First suicide attempt. My mother was so mad at me, I had to walk home. She was not picking me up, so I walked the 4 blocks from the hospital home. Sick? Oh my God, I was sick with my stomach pumped. Not a good walk home. It was the walk of shame for sure, but it made me tough. I was like, okay, if I can get through that, I'll never do that again. Second attempt was after a failed relationship where he did not really know. I had tried to explain it in the most delicate way, but somebody here who knew of me called his parents in the middle of the night and said, "Your son's dating a transsexual who smokes pot." So it was a rough time, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's making me gay for being with you." And I found myself having to try and counsel him. I was the one needing counseling still. Definitely needed therapy after that. But I finally decided it was him or me. So if I could, and years later he asked me, he said, "Why did you become so unbearable to live with?" And I said, "Well, I thought if I could drive you away, you would be safe. They couldn't call you names. They could do whatever you wanted to me, but I couldn't." It broke my heart to see them calling him a fag for being with me, or being mean to him, and him struggling with wanting his parents' acceptance and wanting to love me, and I needed a man with some, I needed a man to stick up for the both of us, much less for himself. So that relationship ended. I did marry. Allen Park Methodist Church, 1980. My husband knew. His parents did not. At that part of the wedding, when it says if anybody finds reason, you know, calling out, I was like, "Oh, Jesus, Lord God." So you wonder why I seem a little nervous sometimes. I feel a little nervous for all of this. But I'm here today, and I have had an absolute ball being transgender. as I've told Finnegan, I don't come out of the closet very often, but I did it for you all and our community, and I want to, at 62, I'm glad there's recorders for this, because I'm only going to do this one.
We'll see about that. You don't know me very well.
There's so much more to my story, but we don't have time.
And I want to share just a tad bit of my story. I actually grew up as a lesbian on the streets of Cedar Springs. I worked in the bars. I was at Sue Ellen's grand opening, like the very first night, Sue Ellen's. And I will tell you, as part of that lesbian community, my entire life, literally my entire life, I'd never met my first transgender person, knowingly met them, until I was like 42, 41. So it's incredible how we lump LGBT together when really we don't know each other very well. So that's why we're trying to do things like this and build community and get to know each other a little better. Growing up as a lesbian, my story is the same as Mason. You know, so that's the best place I could fit in. I could carry a wallet in my pocket, nobody say anything to me. You know, but I started my transition in 2010. So I'm the baby compared to my friends. So transitioning here in Dallas, especially in the 70s and 80s, and even in 2000s, really, where did you find the resources, like medical resources and surgery resources? You know, now we use, many of us use American Institute of Plastic Surgery over in Plano with Dr. Raphael and them. But I don't think we had them then, I'm pretty sure. So what was it like then?
I mean, literally it was, I mean, of course, Arkansas, there was, other than what I could research or what, and of course I have to understand this, I was a kid. So really it was between my parents and the doctor. It was all kind of happening behind me. I mean, obviously I had a hand in it, you know, that I remember one time I was asked to speak before a team of doctors at the University of Arkansas Med Center. So they wanted to show, I gave them one. 12, 13-year-old kid, you know, and I wore bright red lipstick and I gave it to them good. But really in my time there was only that Erickson Educational Foundation, which is still in, I think, existence today. They have now, I looked at it yesterday and they have sort of a transgender thing, but at the time it was very, like I said, I truly believe I was the only one on earth. I had never heard of another one other than Christine Jorgensen, and she was long ago and far away. So it was thinking you were the only one was.
So where did you find, it gave you a little bit of knowledge. Once we begin this transition, the medications that we receive, it's pretty much a lifetime of taking this medication. It's a needed medication that we have to do once a week, once every other week, you know, once a month. So when you were in Dallas, where did you find your HRT and your medication?
Well, by that time I had just, you know, I just went to the doctor and I think I fibbed about it as to why I was taking the hormones. I think it was just, didn't know I could even go through menopause. At 50, I went through menopause, and so that had to increase that. But I don't remember how there were some years in there I didn't take the hormones, but it was tough. It's so, the kids today are so lucky that you have so much available to you, so much information, so much support systems that you can tap into. It's just not like it was the dark ages. It just was.
Well, my experience with all of that really did not involve Dallas. I mean, as I said, I knew where to go for resources because I was sort of I guess what you would consider today an at-risk teen, because I was determined I was going to do what I was going to do. I mean, it wasn't, my parents wouldn't have told you that I was an at-risk teen, but that's how I was behaved. I mean, I just was simply, I had been suppressed for so long and I wasn't going to take it anymore. So If that meant climbing out a bedroom window in a dress and tiptoeing down to the corner and jumping in a cab, that's what it was. But I did know where to go. There were those clubs, and at that moment it was sort of a transitional moment in, I guess, what you would call female impersonation, femme mimicry, these types of clubs. I mean, they used to bring the tourists in on Gray Line tour buses, and they'd unload and come in and see the show, and back they'd go. But so I would go to those places to find out what I needed to do, and what I needed to do was go see a specific doctor in the Maison Blanche building, and he would give me my prescription of hormones, and he was the one who gave me the letter that said that I was allowed to wear female clothing, because if you were caught without that letter, you could be arrested, because it was a requirement that you wear 2 items of male attire at all times. So prior to that, knowing that law, I would just simply stuff my bra with men's underwear. So.
Tough to follow up that one. You know, in the early days, we didn't have the resources, and so when I originally started looking for hormone therapy, and this is an awful story to have to tell because it's embarrassing, but what I had read was that Premarin is short for pregnant mare urine. So what does any unsuspecting, 18, 19, 20-year-old do but ride around in the country and try to find out where are all these pregnant mares? So that was my thinking back. That was my only hope back then. And right, it's embarrassing. But I did find a doctor, and she's still stealth today, believe it or not. She was trans herself. That she helped me originally, and the tests that we had to run were insane. Now lab testing and all that is like maybe $100 or $150, but I was charged. This was a long time ago. I was charged $1,200 just for my lab test, which I paid out of pocket because I was too afraid to use my insurance, because I didn't want to have to explain to anybody or have any kind of a record. That would go back to my company, because I was in the closet at my company. And then surgeries, you didn't know where you were going to possibly get a surgery. I remember thinking, I guess reading Renee Richards and Christine Jorgensen, assumed I'd have to go overseas to Casablanca or someplace. Well, I didn't know about Thailand, but Thailand was an option for later on. But we did have a few doctors to help us out. Of course, I actually just counted on my referral list, and after adding the AOC Transgender Health Clinic in Fort Worth, we now have 22 doctors and 6 clinics in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where people can go for help. So things are looking so much better.
Well, first of all, I just want to let you know, I grew up in Houston, big metropolitan city. I felt like I was totally alone. I know, I'd never heard, never knew. I first even heard of the gay and lesbian community when I was in high school, but not anything else. I mean, that was it. And this is, Houston. So
back then, you and I were it.
Yeah. So and I was fortunate for the hormones part. When I first started, like I said, there was a group of guys that we kind of all started together, and I think that some of them had met again at TWU, because I'd already graduated, been gone from there a long time, but they were younger, and I think that's where they first got together and met each other. And then some of them moved to Dallas, and they had this sort of group, and so they had already had a couple of therapists that they were going to, and a doctor that did hormones, and a surgeon. So by the time that I found that group, I had those resources to use. And I was fortunate because my regular primary care doctor, when I told him about it, now he was fine with me, and he thought it was kind of interesting, but he didn't know anything about hormones, so he didn't want to really work with me with that. However, he would let me have all my blood tests or any other testing under my insurance. And the doctor that was doing my hormones said that, you know, they kind of worked together where I would go do the blood test, take the results to the hormone doctor. He would have the blood test results, then I could do the hormone. So it worked out actually pretty good for me. I only had to pay him like a couple of times a year just to go for follow-ups and checkups, make sure everything was going okay with that. And then for the surgeon part, Dr. Raphael, which were mentioned before, he was, I don't know if he was the only one in Dallas, but that's the only one that I knew of. And he was doing top surgeries, but not really bottom surgeries. And in 2003, we started experimenting. And I consider myself fortunate. I was the third person to go in for the bottom surgery, because otherwise there's no way I would have ever been able to afford it. It just, no way. It just cost is just incredible. And so I feel fortunate that I got to be in that position to do that. But it was all brand new, and he was, you know, trying to work out how to help people. He's a very compassionate doctor. So yeah, that's the resources.
Yeah, and fortunately, because of people like this, when I started, I went through the Thibodeau Clinic, which is part of the Resource Center. So that's where I started my hormones. And I now have a wonderful doctor out in Benbrook, and he actually has a transgender son. So it's just been building and building and building. And we're actually gaining more and more resources here in the DFW area and around the United States. It's incredible. So let's see. What do we have now? So, how were you treated by the LG community within those years of transitioning? Were you part of the LG community at all in any way? Did you stick with, did any of your lesbian friends stick with you and support you?
Well, when I came out in 1980, I had a partner that I had met at TWU. We were I didn't even know about the LG community until we moved to Dallas. A friend of mine in my work told me about the Metropolitan Community Church. So we went there, and I was 1 year out of college. I was a music major, and I wanted to find some place to play, and they had an orchestra. So we went 1 week, I was there the next week. So my experience, I think, is a little different because I am a musician. I didn't really get involved with a lot of lesbian groups back then. There was a lot of stereotypical lesbian groups because everybody was so scattered. There wasn't all the cohesiveness. The only places to meet people were either bars or churches. That was it. There wasn't all these different groups and all activities and stuff. I mean, it's great now. So I played with the church orchestra, and the Oaklawn band was just starting. So most of my life, I have been in the band and orchestra setting, and those people were always very supportive of me. I never had any problems. Everybody was very respectful. You know, of course, it took them a while to get the pronouns and stuff, but I remember the day I went in front of the band and told people what I was doing, and everybody just like, you know, they applauded me. So I've had a lot of support from that group, and that's where I've mainly hung out in, because that's the kind of atmosphere that I like. That's what I do. I like to do that. So they've been very supportive in that. I haven't really had experience Well, I recently worked with Uptown Players as usher, and I worked with them for several years, and then I was usher coordinator for a while. I finally came out to them because they all thought I was just a gay man. And so I came out to them and told them, and they were all like, really? You know, but they were really, really cool. And when I met Brenda, my wife, and she started coming with me too, they've been very supportive. But you know, it's kind of an inclusive theater. If you don't know what it is, Uptown Players is sort of a community theater for the LGBT community. And but as far as like ushering and stuff, we're the only transgender people that are in part of the ushering right now. But everybody was totally respectful, supportive. You know, it's been great. I mean, I haven't really had any bad experiences in that area.
I'm trying to think of, you know, my experience in the community. You know, I went from being basically a straight guy to, I guess I call myself pan these days, but you know, loosely lesbian. However, I should say that a little bit.
Pick a label.
I should pick a label.
I'm so tired.
You know, I've had a really positive experience with the LGBT community. I know some people seem to have a harder time with it, but I, you know, for the most part, really haven't had any major difficulties. Or, you know, I started off doing a lot of work in the volunteer community, and maybe that was a positive for me because I volunteered with the Resource Center. I volunteered with Out and Equal, I volunteered with Youth First, and I volunteered with Outtakes Film Festival, and just found generally acceptance, although there wasn't that many trans people that were, you know, at all these organizations, so there was some sort of a newness, you know, that I brought to some of the experiences for other LGBT people. Of course, today we're like ants everywhere. It's amazing. So, you know, so I think, I know, right? So I think there was some experiences where, you know, we feel kind of like you know, women's only spaces. What does that mean? Like the Blue Moon dance. I used to go to, a few of us have been to the Blue Moon. And fortunately, the gal that ran it, Cynthia Chefs, was very accepting of trans individuals, and she's actually a good friend of mine today. So I always felt welcome in women's circles. There's been a couple of incidents I've had in like, not Sue Ellen's, but in the old Buddy's Bar, which I miss so much. I wish Sandy. Yeah. So, but it's really just a few individuals here that are just very, very cis-sexist, I guess is maybe a good word to say, that those, what trans does is it blurs the gender binary, and some people really want to preserve the gender binary. And what does it mean to say gay couples and lesbian couples if one partner is transgender? Or do we change the meaning of what it means to be a gay man, or do we change the meaning of what it means to be a lesbian? And so some people can be very angry at those kind of changes to our definitions. And you know, it's not really anybody's fault. It's just a matter of what are we going to include in these groups, and nobody really gets to define it. We just argue about it amongst ourselves, and somehow it converges to something else, and nobody's really responsible. And there's no big meeting in the Bronx where we all take a vote and say, I think this is what trans means, and this is what lesbian means. So, you know, so I I think some of the arguments, things like that pop up, but, you know, I've had some violence against us, you know, at buddies, but very, very minimal overall.
I'm going to say that my experience from a young age was that I always felt very welcome in women's spaces. There were a couple of places that I had to go where I could go. Because I was underage, I had to go where they'd let me in. Otherwise, I was relegated to standing out on the street corner and just talking to people and doing what kids that hang out on street corners do. So there were a couple of bars. There was a place called the Grog that was owned by a lovely woman named Vicki Blackwell. No, excuse me, Kitty Blackwell. And then there was a bar named Vicky's on Decatur Street on the riverfront that was very rough, but they were very protective of me and very welcoming to me in there. And I would say that I had more problems during that period with certain gay bars that would want to preserve their all-male space and somehow saw people in transition as threatening to that all-male space, whereas in the female spaces at that time, it was not perceived as a threat, which really kind of, once I found out about trans-exclusive radical feminists, I was like, wait a minute, something's flipped here. We've turned a corner again and we're going backwards. So, but I mean, I would say, for the most part in my youth, my experience was very positive. It's been positive overall. There have been a few limited times. Once when I was here, a friend of mine was very ill. I went to the food pantry to pick up something for him, and they acted like I was going to steal the wallpaper or something. So, yeah, that just brought back that sort of memory. There was this sort of discourse back in the late 60s and early 70s that you didn't want those drag queens around because they carried guns and knives. So, so I've got a switchblade over there.
I guess, you know, if you were asking how it has changed.
No, what was your experience when you moved here? And you told me a couple of stories.
For me, when I first got here, of course, you know, as anybody, we look for a place to fit in. I just want to fit in, I just want to belong somewhere, I want to be in your element. So obviously, you know, fresh out of the hills of Arkansas, where's the gay bar? So the old plantation on Harwood back then was, you know, when they would have drag shows, and I thought, well, maybe that's where I belonged, you know. I'm still trying to figure out who I was and what I was. And that was as close as I was going to get, you know. And as far as I know, for many years that I got here, I was the only post-operative trans person here. But they were inclusive. There's only been a couple of times where, you know, for me, I just want to go and feel comfortable and don't feel like I have anything to worry about. And I went to, there was a bar on Fitzhugh, I went and I got asked to leave. Of course, it was in a men's gay bar, and they didn't want my kind in there. And I was like, well, what kind do you think I am, you know? I didn't know I don't think they knew. But, so I respectfully left. Zippers. There wasn't anything in there for me anyway. It was just a drink on the way home.
You could have just gone over to Judge.
Right? So my short stint as in trying to find my sexuality, I was, for a short time I was a lesbian. And I found she had more difficulty than I did, that her lesbian friends were like not too inclusive of us, teased her about, you know, well, I guess this makes her straight now that she's with me. Don't we had the same equipment. I don't know how that was, you know, but people can be mean. So in any cliquey group, you know, as this count is like anything, it can be kind of cliquey. I see now, as we have worn you all down, you're getting used to us kind, and we're not quite the, that's what I found in coming here, is that transgender has always sort of been the odd man out, shall I say, no offense to anybody. Nobody really knew what to do with trans people. Gay, lesbians, gay men, yes, you all had your place. And but as far as us, if a trans person went to the girl's side or the boy's side, it didn't really know what to do with us. I mean, it wasn't that we felt unwelcomed. It was just trying to sort of, you know, be friends with people. It just wasn't, there really wasn't that places for me. I didn't feel like there was many places for me to go. I didn't feel okay in the straight world. I didn't, you know, there were straight places. I was sort of with the urban there, the lesbian places, the male gay places. I just didn't really quite fit in. So, but it has changed now, thank goodness, and we've worn you down.
May I add something too? Yeah, I'm just going to speak to what Lori was saying and what Finnegan was saying. I do remember in the early 80s here that if you went even to a disco, trans people were required to always wear closed-toed shoes and provide 2 forms of state-issued IDs, where other people could just enter with 1 piece of ID and whatever shoes they had on their feet. So that was one way they had of keeping us out of bars. And this was
gay bars.
This was gay bars.
It was all lesbians. It wasn't just you girls, okay?
I remember having to do that in the late 80s.
Okay.
It was very separated. It was the men were over there and the women were over there,
right.
and the two were not going to meet.
And you could not, like we tried to go as young lesbians in our early 20s, tried to go in JR's one night, and they kicked us out. They said, oh no, you can't, we don't belong in here, get out. Which is ironic, because then, when you went to Austin, they didn't care in Austin. But here in Dallas, oh no, it was gay bars and lesbian bars. And you did not go in either in the 80s. You did not do it.
So I went to all of them, and I will go again.
I usually did too. I usually looked at the doorbell and said, screw you. Anyway, so we're going to have one more question, and we're going to real fast so that people can have time to ask questions. So, in each of your perspectives, in your different, you know, from the time you transitioned to now, what ways have you seen us progress on medical fronts and on the civil rights fronts, and you know, things like that?
You want a minute?
On the medical fronts, it's kind of a double-edged thing here. There are more doctors, and they're easier to find, more supportive. One of the problems that me and my wife are having is with insurance, because you get on a certain insurance, and then, you know, the doctors that all do the hormones are not on that. So what do? Or like, you just have to kind of blind pick a doctor, you know, because insurance is always changing. Like we had a good doctor, she was kind of far away, but she moved to a different practice closer, but then didn't take the insurance we had. So we just kind of have to, I was calling around doctors, and I would just tell them up front that we're, you know, transgender, and we would like to have a doctor that would help us work with our hormones and respect us. Or if they don't work with their hormones, you know, help us find an endocrinologist or something like that. So after several doctors saying, no, we don't want to work with you, I decided to just pick a doctor and not tell them, just go on my first visit. And I was very lucky that the doctor turned out to be really nice and respectful, which is good, but he doesn't know anything about hormones. So we're kind of having to do our own hormone thing. I've been on it for so long, I don't have a problem with that. But it's hard in today's society to find a doctor because of the insurance thing. It's not like, you know, anybody that's cis, you don't have that problem. You can go to any doctor virtually. You don't have to worry about it. You got to tell them that, oh, well, I'm transgender. And they go, what? What's that? You know? And so it was very frustrating in this day and time to try to, you know, find a doctor that was on our insurance that would be accepting. You know, you want to go to somebody that's going to respect you. So that is still a big problem, I think, in society today. And you know, with insurance being what it is, so horrible, I don't see any fixes for that in the near future. So as far as like on the just political, one of the proudest days that I can remember is when President Obama mentioned transgender in one of his addresses. I mean, I cried. Finally, be recognized, you know, as you know, real people.
Before we
legitimate, yeah, legitimate. That was just so incredible. I mean, you know, so I think we are leaps and bounds.
On the medical front, I hadn't thought about this until just now, but I was going for a mammogram, and I met with a doctor up in McKinney, and they do their normal, what kind of medications are you on, do you have any illnesses, all that kind of stuff. And I said, yes, I'm taking at the time spironolactone, and I was taking estradiol, you know, estrogen. And she says, why are you taking that? And I said, well, I'm transgender. And she looked at me puzzled, and she said, well, how long had you had that? I said, that's a long time. I think we're a little more educated today. On television enough, and we've had enough well-known individuals come out in the news over the years, so at least people know of the words. And they may not get the definitions right, but they've at least heard some of the terms. But we've had a lot of changes, I think, and Obama was, I miss him so much. I wish he'd come back. You know, we've had changes in protections, and we've had a number of wins over the years in Supreme Court rulings. You know, we've had it affirmed that the 1964 Civil Rights Act does actually apply to transgender individuals, and that's been a huge protection for all of us, and that supersedes all individual city and state laws that they come up to try to ban us from employment or medical care or same-sex marriage and so on. So we're doing well on so many fronts. You know, so you know, it doesn't mean we don't still have to fight the good fight on a day-to-day basis. You know, we still have struggles in the military, and I have clients that were told that there's a transgender ban on the military, and were in the military and actually had to leave the military, and then it was overruled later, but it was too late for them. They've already left, and their whole careers, their whole educational careers were set up to go into the military. What if you wanted to go in as, say, an Air Force officer, and you spent 4 years studying aerospace engineering, and then all of a sudden that career becomes, you know, untenable for you because you're not allowed in the military. So we're still kind of struggling with some of that. What do we do with deployments and so forth? But I think our fallbacks during the current administration are temporary. I'm optimistic about change coming forward in the future because I think the grassroots movement is going forward. I think the grassroots blue wave is going to be crushing down, I hope, in election this November, and then 2 years from now, I'm hoping that we all can get out and please everyone do your part and vote. I don't want to hear a single person not vote. Please get out and vote as much as you can. That really does help. I'm going to stop there.
Well, I think there are definitely advances in the amount of information and the way that information is dispersed now to anyone, let alone to transgender people. But yes, certainly transgender people do have the internet at their disposal, which is a wonderful tool. It's a good starting place anyway. So, I mean, in some ways you still want to, I would think, talk to other people personally rather than just on the internet, and rather than just taking everything off the internet for granted as the gospel. I mean, I think we've made advances, and I think we've taken some steps backward. In my personal opinion, I think we traded civil rights for marriage equality. I think we should have held out for full civil rights, which would have included marriage equality. That's just my personal opinion, though. So, this whole business about bathrooms, it's a new Jim Crow, as Michelle Alexander would call it, scholar and lawyer Michelle Alexander. It is just another form of dominance and power, and it always begins or ends in a toilet somewhere. So if they want to say I can't go in the bathroom, well then I might just use the spot right outside the bathroom door. Then that's more convenient for me. But yeah, big ones. So I don't think we can just simply say, well, that's a tempest in a teapot, and we need to ignore that, because it is a big deal. Because if something like that happens, then what's next? And once they're once they're finished with us, then you're next. So
Look out.
okay, so I'm done.
I don't know that I can, medically speaking, I recently, I'll tell you the story of recently had just changed doctors. Went to the doctor. I chose to say nothing. I just figured my blood won't lie. Whatever they need to find out, they'll find out. I do always sort of giggle when I see, when you're filling it out and it says last period. Last pregnancy. I'm like, God, thank God I never had any of that. I wanted children desperately. One of the pictures I ever had was I was holding a baby doll when I was 5. That's all I ever wanted to be was a mother, and that escaped me. But medically, it's come so far. It has come so far. So the kids today, you've just got everything at their disposal. I would definitely talk to somebody who's had it done. If you are thinking about any kind of medical procedure, or talk to people who have been to a doctor who's friendly. I don't think transgender or anybody any discriminatory when it comes to the craziness that does our healthcare today. You know, it's anybody with any kind of medical necessity. You go, and it's either you go where your insurance pays for you to go, or you pay out of pocket. So I don't think we're not any special on that. You know, it's just that's going to have to change. You know, as far as the industry.
I wanted to add one more. I just wanted to add one more thing on medical advances, and you know, we have a long way to go for how to improve transgender surgeries, and some of the techniques are very good, and trans women often go through penile inversion surgery, and trans guys go through phalloplasties or metoidioplasties, depending on what they would like to do. But there's a lot of new stuff that should be coming out in the future, and I don't want to say stem cell too loud because it's like a panacea for everything today, but we have a lot of possibilities in the future, and they're doing experiments on growing organs and all that kind of thing. And so we have a lot of possibilities with stem cells, providing possibilities. It's providing, will trans women in the future be able to have a uterus, ovaries that are grown? Will trans guys be able to have the same kind of possibilities for them? And and there's also some really important things for trans people and all the LGBT people, is that what if we want to have a child with our partner? What if we're a lesbian couple? What if we're a gay couple? Is it possible that we can have our own child? And with some of the new stem cell research, it's possible now for them to make sperm from the stem cells of a woman, and it's possible for them to make eggs from the stem cells of a male. And so if you can see the possibilities right there. Of course, sometimes you may have to have a surrogate, and you may not be able to have a boy if you're a lesbian couple, or a girl if you're a gay couple, but now you're still able to have your own child that is genetic material from both of you, which is kind of a neat thing for what's coming out in the future. So.
Or we could just be cloned.
Or we could just be
So that was our last question. One thing that I would like to say is that, two things really. So, and for folks that don't realize this, so I began my transition. I changed all my documents legally and all of that in court here in Dallas. But my wife and I could not actually get married, even though I changed genders. We could not legally get married until our Obergefell happened, because in the state of Texas, my birth certificate said female, her birth certificate said female, and you could not legally get married. So it's really interesting. People don't understand that about the trans community as well, is that just because that happened just because we transitioned doesn't mean that we get all of the rights just thrown in our lap. It doesn't happen that way. Susan and I have been together 9 years now. We've only legally been married 2 years, which is awesome. Exactly. And we've all seen the news how these county clerks have hopefully lost their jobs because they haven't done their job. But one thing I do want to say before we start questions is that how honored I am to sit on this panel, and how ironic it is that how this is a history panel, and that when I win this election, I'll be the very first transgender person elected to any seat in the Capitol. And that is huge. I'm doing this for all of our community. I put myself out there. I've literally put my life at risk. I've gotten hate mails. I've gotten all of that stuff. But I do that because I grew up on the streets of Dallas as a young lesbian, and I saw the problems. I was homeless on the streets here in Dallas. I've worked at Buddy's. Sandy was one of my dearest friends, the owner of Buddy's. As a young lesbian, her and her wife Dawn would basically pull us into the bar, get us off of the streets, because then she knew we were safe.
Yes.
Even though we were underage, she would pull us in there, because that's what community does, right? So that's the atmosphere that I grew up in, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why we have Trans-Cendence, because we have got to build community and stick together. LGBTQ straight, it doesn't matter, we're still community, right? So, sorry, I get off my soapbox, my campaign speech. But anyway, so now we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. So if anybody has a question, here it is.
Hello, everyone. I just have a quick question for anyone who wants to answer. How do you think your answers may have varied if you would have been a person of color?
Good question. I didn't hear what he said.
How do you think your answer would be different if you were a person of color?
Well, I definitely think that transgendered people of color are the most marginalized
The only thing I would add probably to that, just based on what a lot of individuals of color have told me as a counselor, is sometimes I think it may be a little more difficult for persons of color with their families. Just really kind of depends on the background of the families, but it's almost like it's already hard enough for us to be a person of color, and you want to transition on top of that. That makes it even harder for our families. And so I do hear that comment from time to time. And
I mean, do we think it is sort of a racial thing where Latinos or blacks or not just whites, that it's more difficult because it is a stigma for them?
Well, and culturally, it's very different. Just within the cultures, we see that just within our groups. The Hispanic culture is much different than the black culture and the white culture.
Microphone, please.
To be a transgender person within those cultures is much different.
To be a transgender person within those cultures alone is much different, not to mention your own families. So we do hear stories, and it would be interesting. Maybe we need to have a panel that's diverse with all of our communities. And maybe we'll work with Dallas Way to see if we can do something like that and get a very, very, really, really diverse panel. I actually am part of a documentary called Transpose right now that it shows here in Dallas occasionally with Artitude, and it's a very, very diverse cast of transgender individuals from here in Dallas. I made sure that it was really diverse. Young, old, black, Thai, Filipino, all of that. So if you get a chance to see it, you should come and see it. It's really, we just tell our stories. But yes, it's much different culturally.
Somebody else?
Come on, give us your best shot.
Oh, I don't. Hello? Oh. It doesn't like me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I can't hear myself, which is weird for
That's
once in my
fine.
life. So hi, my name is Jay Lenore. And my question is, in your respective areas, do you feel that there are things that you can do to mentor young, upcoming youth, trans youth, or young upcoming trans young adults in your respective areas? I know counseling, you're a PhD student, beauty, and then music. So in your respective areas in political, do you find, or are you planning on, or do you have the intent to support in some way for mentoring trans youth or trans young adults?
That's kind of why we're here, is, for me, I don't come out of the closet often, but I came forward because I felt this project was very much needed. And it is something that for me, I've just now realized that I need to step up and inspire somebody if I can with my story of knowing that, much like why I said my motto is that where there's a will, there's a way. Anything you want, any profession, any transition of any sort, you have to have a strong will. This is a tough world, and it takes, in my case, it took balls to do what I did. Okay, so you can't be. It's not for sissies. You got to be tough in life about anything. Just getting in traffic to get here.
Right.
So we try to inspire where we can, and it is sort of the fact that we're sitting here in a room talking about this topic. In my lifetime, I never thought I would see this. I'm so grateful that we've had the turnout that we've had, and that we are talking about this, and it's that you're open to listen to it, that you care enough to want to hear what happened, that it wasn't just I'm not a pedophile looking to do something to a child in a bathroom. That is so far from it. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that any opportunity we can take to help LGBTQ youth is necessary and needed. I will say, I'm not going to name any specific organizations, but I will say that I tried to volunteer for one of those types of groups, and this is a problem you see in all aspects of business in the world, and where there are gatekeepers. And maybe those gatekeepers are content with the way things are. They're running the show the way they like to run the show. They have their narrative. They don't want it to somehow be trumped or undermined by some other narrative or presence. And so my volunteerism was shut down. So I will say that we need to be, among ourselves, less worried about how we feel about this and more worried about what's happening to young people.
I guess there's been several ways I think that I felt important to contribute to our youth, and maybe I came along a little bit later, but I definitely can understand that political front of who's going to be in power, and always the marginalized groups have a hard time getting into positions of power. That said, I found a lot of ways I was able to contribute to the youth. I was part of the Youth First organization before it became part of Resource Center for a number of years, on the board 2 terms, and was the program director for youth there for a time, and I was part of North Texas Youth Connection for several years, helping out the youth there. I was a teacher, and currently in our private practice, we have a teen group that meets regularly, and we also have a family group that meets concurrently, so the whole family can come and get counseling. And so I've been able to plug in okay. I think another problem that we have is that funding is always an issue. Very difficult to secure funding for transgender programs in general. So that probably continues. We've been really lucky with the Resource Center. I mean, the Resource Center has been just a huge boon to the gender community over the years. A few struggles and a few growth steps, they're always there. But fortunately, I think we're making a lot of progress in the resources that are available for youth.
One of the things we have tried to do in Oklahoma Band, we did reach out to the youth first a few years ago to try to start a young person's band or orchestra, and if there was a little bit of interest, there just weren't enough people, because with the band you do have to have a certain number of people. But one of the problems that we've always encountered with the band is we have to be really careful about liability. Anybody under 18 that comes to our group, they have to have a parent's okay, signature, sign, because we got to protect ourselves. Even though, we want to help them, and we are a really good group for that, still, we have to be really careful. It's sad to me, because I wish that we could I wish it wasn't like that. I wish that people wouldn't look at us and think that we're going to attack all the kids or something, it's stupid. It kind of makes me kind of shy away from that, because I like kids, but I haven't been around kids a lot in my life, so I don't feel super comfortable around them. But I would be happy to help or mentor somebody, but it's just, again, that the way people think of you or treat you, because they think you're going to do something to them or something. So you just have to be careful. I wish we could get over that stigma for everybody. I mean, there's always going to be bad people, but overall people, I think, are doing good.
Yeah, and I actually talk to lots of gay straight alliances in schools. I'm invited to talk to the kids a lot. So if you know a teacher or a counselor, I'm happy to go and talk to the kids. I'm hoping, honestly, win or lose this election, that it does inspire young people to step up and know that they can do this regardless of their LGBTQ, pan, whatever. It doesn't matter. That they can run for election and make some changes that need to happen. It just takes courage and bravery, and as Lori said, the balls to just put it out there and do it. Just put your name on that dotted line and do it. But I will say, one of the things, it's not even just helping, this is how my wife look at it, and I look at this. It's not even just helping the LGBTQ youth, it's helping the straight youth understand how to get along with each other, with the LGBTQ youth. Because yes, we can mentor the LGBTQ youth all day on how to be yourself and be your authentic self, and here's how I did it, here's some advice. But we've got to help the straight kids understand that they're all the same kids. So, like, my wife is a youth minister for a church in Dallas that's not open and affirming. The entire church knows that I'm trans, but I have been the male sponsor on her mission trip for the last 6 summers. And all of the parents know that I'm trans. And they actually asked for me as the male sponsor to go instead of any of the other men in the church. And they say it's because Finn teaches our kids manners and respect and everything else. And that's just because of the person I am. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm trans. But in doing that, I've helped these straight kids stand up now for the trans kids and the LG kids in their own schools. So that's where the change happens, is helping the straight kids as well. We've got to help all the kids. We can't just stick with the LGBTQ. It's called community. Again, community. We're all community. So and now my wife is actually getting her LPC to work with transgender young people and teenagers, because we don't have enough LPC counselors in this area for children. So now she's getting her master's to work with gender diverse children in this area.
That might be a question we would have. How do they think we should help?
Yeah, for our young people out here. Oh, Stacy has something.
I know, I had a question in regards to that for the panel. So for everyone who doesn't know me here, my name is Stacy Monroe, and I'm actually, go ahead and use this. Hello everyone, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Stacy Monroe, and I'm actually getting ready to prepare to run for office here in the city of Dallas. So I'd like to know, thank you very much. I'm getting ready to run for office. I'm considering running for mayor of Dallas in 2019. And one of the questions that I have here today, not only for the panel, but for the members who are here today for this panel, is what can the city of Dallas do to better provide better representation and help for the transgender community, the LG community, and every other underrepresented community that is part of the city of Dallas.
The one thing that just came to my mind, honestly, is we need more shelters to accept our trans folks who are homeless right now. Because our trans folks are the most vulnerable. So they're the most unemployed, they're the most uninsured, and they have the least health care. And there's discrimination in housing. So we have got to somehow get our shelters on board with our trans community. And I mean, I'm just going to get on a soapbox here because this is a huge problem, not just in Dallas, but in Fort Worth as well. Our transgender youth who are homeless. We've got to be able to do something, have more shelters for our youth, for our homeless youth. That's the one thing I'll say.
Awesome, yeah, and that is definitely one of the things I've been looking at. And I'd like to, if it's okay with you guys, open it up to everyone who's in attendance today to see if there's any issues that they recommend that the city of Dallas begins to work on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the jail system, just every system within a city. You know, I do a lot of education, specifically in the healthcare industry. But every industry within the city of Dallas needs to be educated on how to work with your transgender employees, your colleagues, and your customers that come in. It's just a cultural competency that we need to be able to pass on to people, and people need to be open to learning that. You know, I was one of those employees that said, "Oh my God, not another freaking training I gotta sit through." You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of employees are like that, but take things like that seriously if it's at your job and really sit down and listen. So.
I think that just in general, making the face of the people who do represent the city of Dallas look more like the face of the city of Dallas would be a great step forward. That would be a good starting point.
Next. Somebody else have a question?
Good evening, everyone. First, before I do my question, I really want to applaud the 5 of you for your candidness this evening. It takes a lot of bravery and courage to stand in front of a bunch of strangers and tell your stories. So thank you so much. As a gay man, before I came here, I was here with a lesbian friend, and we were talking about the divide that we have just in the lesbian and gay community amongst us. How we don't really interact sometimes, we have very different social groups. So what can we do as these two communities to bridge that gap between the trans community?
Invite us.
I think allies are so important. So very, very important. They're crucial for us.
I'm free for dinner Saturday night.
I'm free. You know, just standing up when you have an opportunity, and there are so many opportunities, whether it be on the internet or with maybe you're going out to dinner with some friends or family or co-workers. There's always an opportunity to speak up. If someone's dissing the trans community, just speak up and say, you know, why do you feel that way? Try to understand where they're coming from, and why is it you don't like transgender individuals? What are you afraid of? You know, that's what it really boils down to, is people are simply afraid, and people aren't confident in themselves, and if they were confident in themselves, then they wouldn't have any issues with the LGBT community in general. So that's why I would say just speak up and offer your understanding to the individuals that are being discriminatory or prejudiced.
I think what it is maybe is that as to a trans person, we kind of hold back. We've been so suppressed for so long that we just sort of, until we know that it's really safe to take another step forward, we kind of hold back. So maybe we don't seem as approachable, but, you know, it could be partially that. So, but once you interact with somebody that you think may be transgender, you'll find that they're very cool people.
Yeah, and just know that we are part of that community because we didn't just, you know, beam in from some other place. We all came from the same place that you all came from. So whether that's, you know, a culture of the streets, the bars, you know, gay friends. If I didn't have gay friends at some points in my life, I wouldn't have had any friends at all. So know that we love you, and all we want is to be loved back.
That's right. Yeah, when I started my transition, I literally asked Susan, I said, does this mean we have to be part of straight world now? I've never been a part of straight world, ever.
Well, I like to just say, there's nobody's going to really understand how it is to be transgender except somebody who's transgender. And what I ask of everybody, it doesn't matter that you understand, just respect. Just respect us. And after the respect, everything else will come. Because there's a lot of people, I don't understand why they are this religion or that, this or that. But I respect, just let people live, respect.
I have a lot of trans friends in Denton, where I live, and some of them are having a lot of hard times with changing their birth certificate, or getting a job, holding a job, or getting access to education, or other things that they need. For the kids these days, do you guys have any advice for them?
My website is, well, my website, I'm not advertising, but there's links to Austin. You can do your name and gender marker change online today. You don't have to actually go to Austin. You can go to Dallas County. You don't want to go to, say, Tarrant County. They're not that supportive. Don't want to go to Denton County. Collin County is iffy, but you know, basically Dallas and Austin and Houston and San Antonio. The big cities are generally pretty good, except for work. And you can do it online. You don't have to go to the courthouse. A lot of people are scared to go in front of a judge. Who wouldn't be, right? So the only disadvantage of going to Austin and doing it online is that now all your paperwork is filed down in Travis County instead of in Dallas County. So if you don't mind standing in front of a judge, you can do the same thing here. And they'll probably change that. I think it's just a matter of time. But there's resources on my website if they would like to go there.
And I'll say, we have a meeting that meets in Denton twice a week. And I would invite you to invite them to go to our website, or we have 9 or 10 Facebook pages. I have absolutely no idea. Only one is public. All of the rest are secret. So that folks can be who they need to be and get advice and talk to folks without certain people seeing what's on their Facebook. But we have a group that meets in Denton, and I would definitely invite them to come to that group and start networking and talking to the folks that are within that group, because they can get a lot of resources within that group. And they can talk to our director, Daniel, there in Denton, and he can help them find whatever resources they need to find in Denton. Yeah, we're connected with a lot of other different groups around Denton too. Yeah, I would definitely invite you to that, for sure. And they can always contact me at any time. I'm happy to talk to them.
Just wanted to add something about education. So I don't know what issues they're having, but I can tell you as someone who did attempt to go to school in the 1970s and was essentially told to get out or they were going to, you know, force me out. And going now, it's night and day. I mean, it's a very respectful environment. It's a very safe environment, other than the fact that people can carry guns on a school campus.
We're working on it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, other than the high cost of education, which is the same for everybody, even, you know, trans people, cis people, it's all the same. It's way too much money. We don't have any real way to fund that other than some scholarships and student loans, financial need. But as far as people, I have been in classes with people who are in transition, who have transitioned, and who are thinking about transition. And everyone is treated very respectfully. So tell them to come to Dallas.
and a little bit more advice. You know, every individual is different, of course. When young people come to us and to Susan and I or any of our chapter directors, we tell them, you know, sit down and talk about what's your specific situation as far as education or as far as getting a job. You know, because some people want to start transition, but they need employment to be able to pay for it. So do you start your transition before, or do you get a job and then start your transition with a job? So you see what I mean? Every situation is completely different. Every family situation is different. Because we have a lot of parents out there who do not support their kids, and they will not support their kids, no matter what. You know, we try to work with them, but a lot of times they're just not. They're just not there. You know, so we try and tell these kids, hang on. Call us if you need us.
I got you.
Just remember it's temporary. Oh, thank you. You know, if they're contemplating suicide, we try and encourage them, hang on, this is temporary. You know, hang on to start transition until you get out of your house. We've had one situation that we had to actually move somebody out of their home. That person was 18 years old. So they were an adult, and this happened 4 or 5 years ago. And she played me a recording that she had recorded her father, and didn't know that she was recording, that she had literally threatened her life on that recording. And I literally just said, "That's it, we're done." And we got some people and moved her out of there at midnight. And she stayed in a safe house for a little while, and now she lives in Seattle. And she went to school, and she's a nurse, and she's transitioning. You know, that's what I mean. Every situation is completely different. So please, have them contact me, have them contact Daniel, whatever, and we will sit down and we'll make a plan. And that's what we try and do, is make a plan. Let's make a plan. Where are you in your life right now? Let's make a plan on how we can get you to the future and keep you safe and healthy while we can.
And to know that if I can do it from a time of dark ages when there was nothing,
Yeah.
guys, don't give up on yourself.
Yes.
That's my thing, is if there's a will, if you have a will
Microphone.
to be you, just be you. Don't give up, just don't give up. There's gonna be bad days in anybody's life, but encourage your friends to just encourage them to be themselves.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up.
Anybody else?
Anybody have a burning question?
I just to address the question about education as well. I'm not sure exactly what campus they're trying to go to, but if you get them to contact women's and gender centers on campuses or LGBT centers on campuses, the
Social work
DFW area has some really amazing schools, actually. UTD is now one of the most open and affirming campuses in the country because of the work that we do with our empowerment programs here at Resource Center. I actually work a lot with the Health Center and the Women's and Gender Centers on UNT's campus, and they're pretty amazing. And I've actually just been in contact with some of the DCCD community colleges, and a lot of them allow us to come on campus and do some of our advocacy work and sexual health education and everything. And so even if they're not a student yet, a lot of those entities on the campus are willing to help people that are trying to, and like direct them where they need to go, especially if like financial aid is something that that is an issue. So that's a good resource to go to on the campus.
UTA is also very,
yes.
very helpful.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with
Thank you for what you do.
Oh, no, thank you.
Wonderful. Let's give Finn and our panelists another round of applause. On behalf of myself from the Dallas Way, and I'm sure everyone in the audience, I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your stories, for becoming vulnerable, sharing your struggle, self-discovery, and finding community with courage, humor, and love. We hope to continue this discussion, so we encourage everyone here to support the Dallas Way. Make sure we have your email address up at the front so you can stay up to date with future events. Consider donating or volunteering your time. This was a starting point to really kickstart how we collect transgender stories and history in the Dallas area. And we're also spearheading similar initiatives with the Latinx, Latino, and the Black communities of the Dallas LGBTQ community. So if you have an interest in participating, just please find a board member here. Thanks again to Finn and Trans-Cendence for working with us today, for the Resource Center for providing the space, this lovely space for tonight.